Hello, this is Jennifer Schauf, and welcome to our Government Contracting Webinar Series. We are in week 9 of 10 weeks of government contracting webinars, and thanks to everybody who was able to join us today. All the webinars are complimentary, and they are listed on our website under the webinar section. The recordings will be listed there typically the same day, and those are posted below the schedule, and they are segmented by topic. A little bit about us on this slide. Our services range from capability statements, 8A certification, contract compliance, and other consulting matters for government contractors. We do host events and seminars throughout the year. We've just scheduled a date for our next Kennedy Center Government Contracting New Year soiree, which will be October 23rd. We hope you can join us. You can find details on our website under the events section. My background is on this slide, but more importantly, I'd rather introduce Mark Amadeo, let him tell you guys about his background, his firm, and we'll dig into today's topic, which is contract awards under the GSA schedule. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm looking forward to hearing your presentation, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, Jennifer. It's great to be here with you, and thanks everyone for listening. There's information about me on the slide, and my contact information is up there as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. A little bit about the firm. The Amadeo Law Firm's primary focus is on federal government contracting. We help clients of all sizes, from startups and entrepreneurs to mid-size and large Fortune 200 companies. And we help clients with all of their government contracting legal needs, from putting together teaming agreements, subcontracting agreements, negotiating with contracting officers, assisting with modifications, helping with IP preservation, really the whole gamut of legal services that government contractors may require. So today we're going to quickly cover the competition rules that apply to GSA schedules. Now, the general rule under the Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR, is that except in limited circumstances, contracting officers have to promote full and open competition in soliciting offers and awarding contracts. Now, to promote full and open competition, agencies are generally required to use competitive procedures that are best suited to the circumstances and that fulfill the agency requirements. Now, FAR identifies 5 types of competitive procedures that agencies can use, and they include sealed bids, competitive proposals, which most contractors are familiar with, broad agency announcements, which are used in SBIR and STTIR awards, and lastly, under FAR, the use of multiple award schedules under procedures established by GSA, that use is deemed to be a competitive procedure. Now, we said that agencies have to promote full and open competition except in certain limited circumstances. Well, FAR sets out what those limited circumstances are, and we've listed them up there on the slide. And they include where there are few capable sources, if there are unusual and compelling and urgent circumstances, national security reasons. And in the case of 8A, veteran-owned businesses, hub-owned businesses, and WSBs, when agencies rely on statutory authority that permits them to make sole source awards. Now, in order to rely on these exceptions to full and open competition, an agency's contracting officer has to go through a process that involves justifying the decision, certifying the accuracy of information he or she relied on, and then obtaining agency approval. But getting back to competitive awards, we said that agencies that use the multiple award schedules using GSA's procedures are deemed to be following a competitive procedure. So what do we mean by multiple award schedule? Well, multiple award schedules are contracts that are awarded by the GSA or VA for similar or comparable supplies or services that are established with one or more suppliers at varying prices. So a multiple award schedule is one government contract between the government and a lot of vendors and suppliers. And the particular federal program that they are awarded under is the Federal Supply Schedule Program, also known as the GSA Schedule Program. Now, GSA schedule contracts are indefinite delivery and indefinite quantity contracts, and they're for commercial supplies or services, and they're expected to be offered at volume prices. So folks that talk about getting on the GSA schedule, that's really shorthand for two things. Being awarded a GSA schedule contract, and remember, it's a multiple award contract, so others have been awarded too, and also getting on the GSA vendor list. So the process for getting on the schedule is complex, but you have in Jennifer Schaus an expert in the application process and someone who can guide you through the process. But at the risk of drastically oversimplifying the process, I've outlined it on the slide. Now, we're not going to go through the process, but the point I want to make here is that while there may be some review of your proposed prices against the prices offered by other vendors during this application process, you're not necessarily competing directly one-on-one against other vendors to get on the schedule. It's not a I win or you lose situation. And like I said, other vendors may be applying at the same time and might be awarded a scheduled contract just like your company. So the stiff competition really occurs later at the ordering stage. So we've said GSA schedules are deemed to be competitive. So what are they? Well, there are three sets of ordering procedures. There are ordering procedures for fixed price items, which can be supplies or services that don't require statement of work. There are ordering procedures for hourly rate services that do require a statement of work. And then there are ordering procedures to be used with blanket purchase agreements, or BPAs. Now, a few important things to know about BPAs. Now, BPAs are used to fill repetitive orders for supplies or services. So if an agency is ordering the same thing week after week or month after month, they can use a BPA. And BPAs can be entered into with multiple vendors. So BPAs are like GSA schedules within GSA schedules. And with BPAs, there can be two rounds of competition. First, the agency has to establish the BPA with one or more scheduled contractors. And then later, there can be competition when the agency puts in an order under the BPA. And like non-BPA orders, BPAs can be established for fixed rate supplies or services that don't require statements of work, or for hourly rate services that do require statements of work. So let's go over the ordering procedures, which, as we said, are deemed to be competitive. The first one we'll talk about applies to all non-BPA orders at or below the micro purchase threshold. Now, regardless of whether a statement of work is or is not required, agencies can place an order with any scheduled contractor that can meet the agency's needs. So agencies don't need to compete the order or send out RFQs. The second set of procedures we'll talk about applies to non-BPA orders that are above the micro purchase threshold but don't exceed the simplified acquisition threshold. It also applies when an agency wants to establish a BPA that does not exceed the simple acquisition threshold. So when a statement of work is not required, in other words, for a fixed rate non-BPA order or to establish a fixed rate BPA, agencies must survey at least 3 scheduled contractors through GSA Advantage, or they must review catalogs or price lists of at least 3 scheduled contractors, or they have to request quotes from at least 3 scheduled contractors. Now, if they can't do any of those things, they must document the circumstances for restricting considerations for less than 3 contractors. When a statement of work is required, in other words, for an hourly rate non-BPA order or to establish an hourly rate BPA, agencies must provide an RFQ to at least 3 scheduled contractors. Now, for non-BPA orders, if they can't So if they can't do these things, the contracting officers have to document circumstances for restricting consideration to less than 3 scheduled contractors. Now, unfortunately, the regulations are silent on what happens if an agency that's trying to establish a BPA for an hourly work can't find 3 capable scheduled contractors. But the culmination of this process is the contracting officer placing an order with the contractor that provides supplies or services that represents the best value. Or in the case of a BPA that's establishing an agreement with 1 or more scheduled contractors, it's establishing it with the contractor that represents the best value. So we said if agencies don't survey or send RFQs to at least 3 contractors, they need to document the circumstances for restricting consideration to fewer than 3 scheduled contractors. Well, FAR limits those circumstances. There has to be an urgent and compelling need that if an agency followed the procedures would result in an unacceptable delay, or there's only one source that's capable of providing the supplies or services because they are unique or highly specialized, or because the new work is a follow-on to an original scheduled order. So the last set of procedures applies to any non-BPA orders above the simplified acquisition threshold. And also when agencies want to establish any BPA over the simplified acquisition threshold. And in both instances, they apply regardless of whether a statement of work is required or not. So first, agencies can seek a waiver of the compete procedures, and we'll talk about the waiver in a minute. Otherwise, agencies have to either post an RFQ on eBuy to give all scheduled contractors the right to bid, or they have to provide an RFQ to as many scheduled contractors as possible to ensure that they get quotes from at least 3 contractors. Now, if fewer than 3 scheduled contractors submit quotes, the contracting officer has to prepare a written justification that additional contractors can't be identified. And he or she must explain the efforts that were made in order to obtain quotes from at least 3 scheduled contractors. And again, the culmination of this process is an order placed with a contractor that represents the best value, or the establishment of a BPA with 1 or more scheduled contractors that represent best value. Now, we talked about contracting officers obtaining waivers from the compete requirements. Well, 2 reasons can be given. First, there are limited sources, and again, if there's an urgent and compelling circumstance, or there's only one source that's capable of providing the requirement, or if new work is just a follow-on to an original order. The second reason is if the item is peculiar to a particular maker or manufacturer. And to get the waiver, a contracting officer has to comply with written justification requirements and then obtain agency approval. So up to now for BPAs, we've been talking about the competition requirements for establishing the BPAs with scheduled contractors. Well, what about when an agency wants to actually place an order with a BPA holder? Well, for single award BPAs, they just place the order with the only BPA holder. And for multiple award BPAs, if the order is at or below the micro purchase threshold, then the agency can place it with any BPA holder. Now, if the order is above the micro purchase threshold, but not over the simplified acquisition threshold, the agencies have to consider all BPA holders unless there's an urgent compelling need, or there's only one capable source, or the work is a follow-on work. And if the order is above the simplified acquisition threshold, agencies need to provide RFQs to all schedule holders, or they need to obtain a waiver of the competition requirements using the process that we just talked about. So what about set-asides? The regulations under FAR for GSA schedules authorize contracting officers to set aside GSA schedule orders at their discretion. So for hub zones and 8As and WSB companies. Now, we don't have time to address it here, but a recent Supreme Court decision in Kingdomware may make small business set-asides for GSA orders mandatory and not discretionary. So some argue that under the reasoning in Kingdomware, agencies have to set aside orders between $3,000 and $150,000 for small businesses, as long as what is known as the rule of two can be satisfied. Now, that's still an open issue. But if an agency has set aside an order for a hub zone business or an 8A or a WSB business, the agency still must follow the GSA ordering procedures that we've gone over when they establish the BPA or when they put in their orders. So what about sole source? We talked earlier about the 8A and the hub zone and veteran-owned and WSB sole source exceptions to the competition requirements. So can an agency say, hey, I want to sole source this large order to an 8A company or WSB? Can I do that following the SBA sole source regulations under a GSA schedule? Well, GSA's the website flat out says no. It says SBA set-asides are okay, but sole source awards are not. And going back to the FAR rule on competitive procedures, you can see why. If you're not using a sealed bids or competitive bids or one of the other procedures, and you intend to make a scheduled award, the rule says that using a schedule will be competitive as long as you're following GSA's procedures. Now, that being said, GSA's procedures for orders at or below the micro purchase threshold do allow agencies to place orders with any scheduled contractor or any BPA holder. And of course, agencies can always obtain a waiver if they need to get a supplier service from a particular vendor. So that's all I have today for the competition rules under GSA schedules. Thanks everyone for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Mark, great presentation. Thanks again for joining us today. Tomorrow we are covering the SBA 8A qualification checklist. Next week will be the 10th and final week, and we will get into more details on sole source contracts, as well as the GSA schedule proposal. If anybody has questions about today's presentation or any other government contracting topics, please contact Mark. His contact information is there. He's easy to work with, very knowledgeable, and comes highly recommended from our side. So thanks again, everybody, and thanks again, Mark, for joining us today.
Thanks, Jennifer.